Hello, my name is Dabar Naim and you are watching RPTV News. It's February 2021 and we are entering the second year of coronavirus pandemic. In Regent Park, where the revitalization is happening, once again the community has been shaken by the news of gun violence. According to the media reports, four men in their 50s and 60s were sitting in a car in a parking lot on Oak Street near Regent Park. At 11:43 p.m. they were fired upon. All the victims were taken to the hospital. One had life-threatening injuries. Two of them had non-life-threatening injuries and the fourth one was unharmed. In June of 2019, the Liberal government of Canada tabled new legislation to the Criminal Code and Firearms Act to protect Canadian communities from gun violence. The pending legislation includes the following measures.
Complete the prohibition of assault-style firearms to ensure these weapons cannot be legally used, transported, sold, transferred, or bequeathed by individuals in Canada. Combat intimate partner and gender-based violence and self-harm by allowing people such as concerned friends or relatives to apply to the courts for the immediate removal of an individual's firearms or to suspend and review an individual's license to own firearms. Fight gun smuggling and trafficking by increasing criminal penalties for the illegal importation of firearms. Help create safer communities by supporting municipalities that ban handguns through bylaws restricting storage and transportation in their jurisdictions. Give young people the opportunities and resources to avoid criminal behavior by providing funding to municipalities and Indigenous communities to support youth programs.
On February 22, 2021, the Minister of Public and Safety and Emergency Preparedness, Bill Blair, and the Liberal MP for Toronto Centre, Marci met with community members Paulos Gebreyesus, Executive Director, Regent Park Community Health Centre, Jamal Paisley, Student Parent Support Worker, Regent Park Community Health Centre, and Sureya Ibrahm, Supervisor Community Connections at Toronto Centre for Community Learning Developers, Toronto, from the Regent Park community to discuss the subject of gun violence and to let Canadians know about the new legislation. Here is an excerpt from the meeting.
We will hear directly from the Minister in a few minutes, but before that, I'd like to make a few remarks. Regent Park Community Health Centre has served the neighbourhood of Regent Park for over 49 years. Our purpose, our mission, is providing comprehensive health and community services that remove barriers and improve lives. As a community health centre, we pursue our mission by addressing not only individual health factors, but also supporting the community's health. We know that the most powerful drivers of health are social determinants, such as income, education, safe and secure housing, social inclusion, race, gender, among others. When it comes to mental health, the key three determinants are freedom from discrimination and violence, social inclusion, and access to economic resources. These three factors are not readily accessible in neighborhoods like Regent Park. The impact of a single instance of violence on a community level is profound. Just 12 days ago, MP Ian and I were joined by over 80 community members in assessing the impact of the latest incident that occurred in our neighborhood, where 3 fathers were seriously injured by gunfire. When incidents like this are not isolated, when they become endemic, the impact on the whole community is devastating. Community health centers are embedded in community, governed by the community, and we are set up to respond to our community's priority needs. A key priority for Regent Park is safety from gun violence. This work has led us to develop wraparound programs and services in Regent Park for families. And this work starts with prenatal and early year supports for families, wraparound programs for children and youth, as well as a full range of primary health care and community supports for people who face barriers to accessing health for themselves and their families. Much of our attention and focus as an agency, a neighborhood, a city, and as a country have been on COVID and thankfully the vaccine rollout. However, the endemic threats such as gun violence must also be addressed as a public health priority. The roots of gun violence are complex and require multiple interventions. So I'm very honored and pleased to be here with you to support the actions of the minister. And at this point, I'd like to introduce my respected colleague, Mr. Jamal Paisley, to share his remarks. Mr. Paisley grew up in Regent Park and attended our wraparound programs for youth throughout his secondary school career until graduation. Many years later, Mr. Paisley in 2018 joined the Regent Park Community Health Center staff team as a youth mentor and currently engages and supports over 40 youth in the neighborhood. Jamal, over to you.
Thank you, Paulos, for having me, and thank you for the invite, guys. My name is Jamal Paisley. I am a former resident of Regent Park and now a community worker, like Paulos said. I'm just going to share a little bit about myself and the effects of programming and the continuous need for funding in areas such as Regent Park. I grew up in a large household of 9 siblings. I'm the second oldest, so you would know that responsibilities came at a very, very young age for me. And having a single mom with so much kids, a lot of her time, usually her attention wasn't on me, which led to a lot of downtime, a lot of time for me to dibble and dabble. And as we all know, like a community like Regent Park, there's the good, the bad, and the ugly. But I just want to highlight a couple of things. Growing up in poverty, not to say that there was a lack of opportunities, but maybe the opportunities weren't the interest of the youth, right? For me, it was much easier to gain access to a firearm, drugs, rather than landing a job interview, right? Which was sad. Started to get involved in wraparound programs in the neighborhood. Started to gain trust, because trust within the youth is something that I believe is critical. We can have all these wonderful programs, we can have all these wonderful services well funded, but if there's no trust, then the program will be a failure, in my opinion. I was lucky enough to meet one of my mentors through one of these wraparound programs, and it was somebody that could relate to my issues, right? He was somebody that grew up in the Regent Park neighborhood, went on to post-secondary education, graduated, came back to the community as a teacher. And he was somebody that I saw, went through the struggle that I'm going through, was able to pick his choices through wraparound programs, and was able to be successful. So with that, I started to join a lot of programs, build trust. I had a lot of opportunities to travel and just do things that I would not necessarily be able to do if I was just in my box of Regent Park. The present time now, I'm working with youth now, so it's kind of cool to be on the other side of the table, but there's still a lot of work to be done. I still see the same issues that I was facing as a youth many years ago. I wouldn't say many years ago because I'm still fairly young, but I'm 32. And the same issues that I've dealt with growing up in Regent Park is the same issues that the youth that I deal with today are still facing. There's still police brutality. There's still gun violence. There's still lack of programming. Even though we are going through a revitalization, the buildings look nice, but the root problems are still here. And I can't stress it enough. We have to meet the youth where they are, right? We have to meet them before they are in their teen years and before they make the decision to pick up a firearm or pick up drugs for various reasons. We need to meet them where they are, right? For me, I didn't build trust by me going into a youth center every day after school, going through programming. I built trust by the youth workers coming to me. Sometimes they had to come to me on the basketball court with a bunch of guys on the side smoking weed, but they came to my safe space, right? That was my safe space, and they were making themselves vulnerable by entering that, right? And when I saw that, I started to gain trust. And when they said, hey, Jamal, meet me at my office, I felt safe enough to go and meet them there, right? So the need for funding, gang intervention, prevention, we need to meet them at an earlier age, way before high school, gain their interest. We need programs that are youth-led, right? I could design a million programs that I think is amazing, and nobody may show up. Why? Because it's not what they're interested in the time of now, right? Things have changed. Social media is huge, right? TikTok, Instagram, those are things that they're interested in. So having them have control of their programming and they building it and decreasing the barriers of catchment areas, or you have to fit a criteria to join my program. I think that is something that holds a lot of youth back. Because for myself, there was a lot of programs that I wouldn't join because, Jamal, you have to take home this form and your mom has to sign it and you have to come back. And from what I heard, my mom has to sign anything, I was out the door, right? I just wanted a space where I can go, be myself. And then I would start to listen to what else you have to offer, right? And like I said to Paulos, I thank him for the opportunity to come here to speak today, to share my experience. Even though I believe Regent Park is no longer deemed a priority neighborhood, it's much indeed a priority neighborhood. We still have the root issues that I've been dealing with as a youth. And now that I'm a youth worker, I still see these issues. So I'm happy for that opportunity, and thank you for having me. And I'm hopeful for the future, and hopefully this new funding and this new grant will create a lot of great opportunities that will minimize gun violence and that will minimize youth that may be pushed into the wrong direction. So thank you for the opportunity, Paulos, and thank you, Minister Blair. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamal. Sureya, I'll just ask you to unmute yourself now, and I'll now invite Sureya Ibrahm, the supervisor of the Community Connections of the Toronto Centre of Learning and Development, to deliver some remarks. Sureya, over to you.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you for everyone, especially Blair. And I remember last year, I just gave him my 2 cents, and it was in the community center, and a frustration. He let me speak and get out of my frustration. I just want to say thank you for that. Oh my God, Jamal, what you say, all of it, like I was just noting everything what you said. I just want to say thank you. I have a 3 teenager who, whatever that you said, all of it was 100%, and I'm related to that. And I'm grateful also. I'm speaking as a community advocate and also the founder of Mother's Peace, who also benefit my teenager, who are benefit from Pathway as well, who had opportunity going to field trips, who had rooted from when they were young, from high school into university graduate. 2 of my kids who are benefited, and another one on a way starting Ryerson this year, September. And I'm grateful all of the benefits that the Pathway that provide for teenagers especially. And I just want to say thank you all of you guys giving a platform to discuss the benefit of the grassroots or the organization does for the community as well. And all of that. And also I'm going to say the trauma that we carry, the gun violence does to the community as well. And it's ripple effect, that what it does every time it bring a trauma again and again. And also I will urge all of policymakers, Blair, all of them, all the level of the government as well, and to have really have restricted law to prevent the gun in the hand of young people. And as an adult, as a responsible citizen, and we cannot let this to happen again and again, and we make it so normalized to have gun access to the gun. Yes, poverty is the root cause of it, but at the same time, having the pathway that it gives the platform, the young people, to engage without restriction and without having a barrier to be a part of in their community, and also speak to them in a way that that could be no barrier when they will be around. And I want to say the impact that I've been supporting the moms who are inflicted by the gun violence throughout so many years. And I just want to urge you that to have making up when it comes to making a policy making, please banning the gun in young people's hand, and urge you to do that. I'm speaking on true in my heart this, and living and for the last 23 years in the community, and I see the impact the gun have in young people's life. We cannot sit and watch the young people dying, and we could prevent it. It's a preventable, and we need to see it as a pandemic as well. And I'm saying as the moms, and I'm seeing the moms who are suffering, who are lost their son from the gun violence, and seeing it again and again, and it reoccur trauma. Paulos mentioned that we had 2 weeks ago, 3 old people were shot, and I couldn't leave the house because of the trauma that reoccurred again and again. Let's not normalize. And I just want to say thank you for taking time, all of you guys, and urge you in your heart, make the right choice. And this is all of us that will impact us. It's not just Regent Park, it's throughout the city. Let's not normalize what is happening around us. Save young people's life. And I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to speak here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sureya. Thanks very much for that. I would like to now invite Marci Ian, the Member of Parliament for Toronto Centre, to deliver some remarks.
Mary Liz, thank you so much. And might I just say, Sureya and Jamal, thank you for speaking to your experience. And thank you for speaking from the heart. And Paulos, good to see you again too. Thank you for all the work that you do in our community. Listen, our community has seen its share of gun violence. And I've met mothers like Sureya has worked with, who have lost their children, and young people who have lost their friends, and innocent community members like the men that Paulos and Sureya were talking about, who were shot while in a vehicle just days ago, caught in the crossfire. We see this all too often and far too much. As an advocate for young people across the country, and having lived in different neighborhoods throughout the city, I have seen firsthand what happens to young people when they feel that they are forgotten, when they feel that they don't matter, that nobody cares. What happens when they are lost and they fall through the cracks. And I've had conversations with community leaders and advocates who have grown up around gang and gun violence, and they say that they attribute their path to success, their path out of that violence, to mentors. We've had some really good conversations. People just like them who grew up in the same neighborhood, people just like them who now give back and guide young people. People like Jamal. Jamal's doing this. People who create a space for them to succeed, a comfortable space, which is what Jamal talked about. People who give them the tools and are there to offer advice. Often we see these young people, these mentors who are giving to other young people, do it with their own resources. They care that much. Their only goal is to stop a cycle of violence and despair. In short, they want to serve. That's what they want to do. We've seen and we've heard today in what Jamal said and what Sureya said and Paulos said, that community-based programming can do so much for our young people. Jamal pointed out that he's in favor of youth-led programs. We've seen what happens when we invest in our youth, when we hold them up, but we also help them up so that they can meet their full potential. With more, it is my pleasure to introduce the Honorable Bill Blair, Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness.
Thank you very much, Marci, and I'll jump in here, and I thank you very much, and I just want to share with everyone what a real honor it is for me to serve in the same government as Marci Ian. And I'm very proud to share those responsibilities. And I am also very, very pleased that she represents a community which for me has been a very important part of my entire life. And my mother was born in Regent Park and went to Lord Dufferin, and I had the privilege of working there for a very long time, and knowing that it's so ably represented by someone who cares so much about the people of Regent Park is a comfort to me. I also want to begin by thanking Mr. Gebreyesus, Gebreyesus, I apologize, for his warm welcome here. And the Regent Park Community Health Center, I remember as in the 70s as a young police officer dropping into the Regent Park Community Health Center, which was then located in an empty apartment on Belshell Place, and working with the people there. And as the opportunity, I spent 5 years walking in Regent Park. And that experience taught me something very important. And it wasn't just the experience of being a young police officer in that community. It was the lived experience shared by the many friends and extraordinary people that I met working in Regent Park. And I returned there in the mid-90s and had another opportunity to work with again and got to know better. I was the unit commander in the area at the time, got to know better some of the extraordinary people that were working to make a difference in the community. And as Sureya mentioned, those experiences, sharing the lived experiences of people who work in the park. And as Jamal talked about, I also knew extraordinary youth workers and young mentors and who worked in that community, Lucky Booth and Jean Lincoln, and mothers like Sureya, Odette Shepherd, who'd lost their children. And that lived experience and watching the extraordinary work that they did to help young people make the right choices and to provide support. I was also around at the Regent Park Community Health Center when Carolyn Acker developed the extraordinary program you benefited from Jamal. And I remember the struggle in those days, getting anybody to fund it. And yet the realization of first of all, the generational trauma Sureya spoke of young people growing up in a community in which there is so much injustice and so many disparities. That systemic racism that produces, disparate outcomes for racialized people in our city and in this country is something that I think you have to be in those communities to really understand and learn from the lived experience of those who experience those disparities and those who experience the generational trauma that Sureya spoke of as well. I was in another Toronto community similar to Regent Park a few years ago. And I remember I went to the youth center and I went with the youth mentors and leaders and the kids that lived in that community. And they talked to me about 22 shootings that had happened so far that summer. And what it really meant to that community is every child knew someone who had been the victim of gun violence. And for the vast majority of Canadians growing up in that country, that's completely alien to their lived experience. But the kids growing up in neighborhoods like Regent Park, that's too much their reality. And we have to recognize that. And it means that we have to support the work that really does make a difference. And I wanted to just, if I may, I've got some remarks about some of the work that we introduced yesterday and some of the things that we know are important and that we'll be doing. But I want to tell you that my lived experience and my learning about what makes neighborhoods safe, I learned in Regent Park. And I learned from people like yourselves, who work in those communities, who grew up in those communities, who give back to those communities. And you've taught me the importance of supporting, those youth-led programs you speak of, Jamal, supporting, mentors and leaders in our community who develop programs and ensuring organizations like the Regent Park Community Center have the support because they become social hubs. They're places of leadership, they're places of service, and they make a difference in the quality of life in those communities. And so I want to assure you that I've learned more from the time I've spent in Regent Park than in any other place I've had the opportunity to learn. And I've learned from the people of Regent Park and their example and their lived experience informs everything we do. And I want to speak about some of those things that we do. I recognize, and we talked a little bit earlier about the impact of gun violence in every community, but it's certainly in racialized communities like Regent Park and the disparate outcome it has and the generational trauma that it causes in communities. We know, and I'll tell you from, again, many years of experience, you don't arrest your way out of those problems. That's not how we solve this. And certainly law enforcement and dealing with the people that commit these violent acts is necessary and important. But if that's all we do, we'll always be very busy and we'll always fail. And so we need to do more. First of all, I like to take a public health approach, and I learned that from the Regent Park Community Health Center to most of the social challenges that we face. And we've looked, for example, at where many of the guns come into the community from. And there are three essential ways in which criminals gain access to guns. They're either smuggled across the border from the United States, and they have an awful lot of guns down there, or they're stolen from legal gun owners, or there's somebody criminally diverts them, they buy them legally, and then sell them illegally. That's essentially the three ways in which people who would commit violent crimes with guns gain access to them. And so we're introducing really strong legislation to help strengthen our borders, to deal better with the secure storage of firearms, and to prevent the criminal diversion of guns. Because if we can stop the supply of guns coming into the community, it doesn't solve all the social problems and social conditions that give rise to conflict and violence. But if we can take the instruments of lethality out of the community, we can make it safer. And so we're making those investments, and it's the right thing to do, but it's not the only thing to do. We also know that some people own guns legally, and sometimes their situation changes. And in incidents, for example, of domestic violence and intimate partner violence, the presence of a firearm can be used to actually injure or kill the woman, and it's almost always women in those cases, but it's also an instrument of intimidation and coercion, and no one should have to live in that fear. And as well, there are, 75% of the people that die from gun violence in this country are suicides. And where there's a presence of a gun and somebody's depressed or emotionally disturbed, we need to be able to remove guns from that situation to keep people safe. And then finally, we also see, unfortunately, a surge in this country and around the world of people who are online and they're advocating hatred and violence towards, religious minorities or women, or racial minorities. And in those cases, we have to ensure those people don't have access to firearms. So we're introducing what are called extreme risk laws, so that the authorities can do a better job of protecting us all from these people having access to guns. And as you're also probably aware, last year, there are just some guns that are so darn dangerous. There's just no way that they could be allowed to be used in a civil society. So we prohibited those, and we've completed the process of that prohibition with the legislation that we introduced. But I want to be very clear. In the introduction of all of those measures, that doesn't solve the root cause problems that are giving rise to trauma and violence in our communities. And that's the work that we must do with you. We've made, as a government, we make lots of investments in our border services, in the RCMP, in police investigations to deal with guns and gangs. But we also recognize that the criminal justice system actually creates disparity because of the systemic racism that exists in our society and in the criminal justice system. And we know that results in really awful outcomes for racialized people and people from poorer economic circumstances. And so we're also looking at making significant investments in changing many aspects of the criminal justice system to be fairer to people and to help young people make better choices. I will tell you, I've seen a lot of young people who go to jail and they rarely come back better citizens. But there are opportunities to connect them to community, to connect them to youth mentors, to connect them to community supports, to teach them how important their community is and that there are people there to help them. And when we do that, and there's a number of initiatives we're undertaking with justice centers and pre-charge diversion programs to help there are off-ramps in the criminal justice system to help get people to better places and better choices. You've also highlighted through the lived experience you shared with us today, the importance of community, the importance of mentorship, the importance of education, and the importance of employment. That's one of the reasons we provide support, and it's an important thing that governments must do to ensure that young people do have opportunities to complete their education, that they also then have opportunities to good jobs, good housing, good health care, all of those things that help them realize their full potential. I remember many years ago, I was a police chief, and I made the mistake of talking about young kids that we were trying to help in some of our poor racialized neighborhoods across the city. And we made the mistake of referring them to high-risk kids. They're not. It was a terrible thing to call them. And nobody wanted to help. They were all scared of those kids. And so the next year we called them high potential kids. Kids who with a little bit of help, they can realize their extraordinary potential and become extraordinary citizens. And all of a sudden, we changed how we looked at those young people, and we changed the way in which we provided those supports. It's a better way to do it. It's the right way to do it. And that's why, in addition to the money that we've made available for policing and dealing with guns and gangs, we recognize the importance of investing directly in communities. I don't want to go through do other orders of government because the money gets kind of diverted and diffused and we don't know where it goes. We're going to come straight to the community. We're going to come straight to you. We're going to rely on your advice and your lived experience. I'll go through my colleague and friend, Marci Ian, and we'll come to the community. Our finance minister announced a program, $250 million over the next 5 years. It sounds like a lot of money, but the need is so great, we have to be smart in how we spend it. And so the best way to spend it and the best way to produce great outcomes is to learn from the lived experience of the people who work and serve in the communities that have the greatest need. And then we will make investments to support the important types of activities and organizations that you've spoken of, giving young people youth-led programming, the young people an opportunity to make their own choices and to make better choices, and the supports that they need for education, for employment, for fulfilling a life and to living a life that is socially just. And we are prepared to work with you to do all of those things. I am so grateful for the opportunity for me to come back to Regent Park, even though it's only virtual. It's a very special place with extraordinary people. And when we learn, sometimes when you look from the outside, all you can see is the problem. But when you get the opportunity to look from the inside, you can see the potential and you can see the extraordinary partners that we'll have an opportunity to work with. I want to assure you all of our commitment to continue to work with you. We'll take the steps necessary to strengthen gun control in this country. We'll take the steps necessary to deal appropriately with those who would commit violent acts and victimize others. But we know that the more certain path to safety in all of our communities is through respect and support, leadership and mentorship. And we are quite prepared to invest in those things too. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all today. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Please do not forget to like, comment, and share to our channel. Follow us on all our social media platforms. And for more information, please check out our website.